Hi, good afternoon. My name is Rob Erickson, and I run Vesta's user experience and mobility practice. With me today, I have Peter Mobert, who runs our development group. And what we're going to talk about today is some of a backgrounder about SAP user experience for EAM, and then give a little demo of a fairly innovative product that Vesta's created called Vesta Hydrogen that encapsulates a lot of the things we'll talk about in the SAP roadmap. So without further ado, let's get started. So the overall agenda today is a brief backgrounder of user experience. So just a discussion of what Vesta's point of view of what user experience is and how it can impact your enterprise and how it interacts with your overall EAM system. Then we'll move into a discussion of the SAP user experience strategy with specific attention to how it really relates to EAM specific, in particular. So there's a broad strategy, of course, but we're going to kind of just distill down to the elements that we feel have the most impact on enterprise asset management customers. Next, we'll go through some of the key user interface technologies. Of course, to produce any kind of user experience, you need to have some kind of technology. And so we'll walk through some of the key SAP user interface technologies that are out there now and just drill into an overview of each one and then talk about how they might relate to your EAM efforts. And then lastly, as I mentioned, we're going to do an introduction and a demo of Vesta Hydrogen, which we think is a pretty interesting and novel approach to user experience in SAP EAM. So, user experience. So really, the game has changed. It used to be back in the good old days when you were producing an enterprise system, you were mostly focused on functionality alone, right? So can the system do X, Y, and Z? You really weren't too worried about what the users thought of it because the users were just kind of there, right? They were sort of taken for granted, if you will. But essentially, that was a fairly simple game of checkers, right? We were just trying to move the pieces around and get the functionality in place. But now it's much more complicated than that. The game has become more of a game of chess, where you really have to anticipate moves and think a few steps ahead and incorporate a lot of different strategies and aspects into your enterprise systems. So people's demands have really changed from these older, more system-focused views of data, where it's a very, on the left-hand side there, where it's a very prescriptive and defined view, very system-centric view of data that's not necessarily very flexible, required people to adapt to it. And instead, people are more interested in the types of interfaces that we see on the right. Of course, these are examples of SAP Fiori screens that illustrate a more dynamic approach, an approach that allows screens to be shown on devices of the user's choosing in a manner that they would prefer, and also lets them really focus on the tasks at hand rather than learning the system. So this is one way that the game has really changed. Some of the reasons for that, this is something that I kind of like to call the Starbucks effect, where Starbucks either created or exploited, I guess, a new market by, instead of coffee just being something that you ordered to drink and stay awake, right? So sort of in my father's time, right? It was just a drink that you had because it was hot and it helped wake you up. But now it's something that people have almost a deep interest in creating and customizing based on the way Starbucks has impacted many people's consumption of this. So now there's a kind of a way that you go in and you order something specifically the way you like, your Frappuccino or what have you, and it's made directly for the way that you want it to be made. So it's sort of catering to the end user here, the end user or customer here, and really has changed the way that a lot of people interact with other things. There are a number of other companies, of course, that kind of have exploited these and made these higher expectations in the consumer space. Of course, amongst them are some of the giants of the internet industry. Amazon has definitely changed the game with its almost scarily prescient way of predicting what you may want based on your browsing habits and things. So when you go into Amazon or you get an email from them, it's kind of funny how they send you an email that really almost anticipates what your needs might be based on what you've been looking at before and your different interests. So these are the kind of things that, really instead of having having people adjust to the system adjusts to us and our expectations. Another example of this, of course, is Facebook, where instead of having news and information delivered to us in a very kind of static way, where we receive a newspaper or whatever, or you get a letter from a friend, whatever, and in some similar fashion where information is published to you and you're a fairly passive consumer of that. Instead, Facebook and similar technologies have allowed us to really create our own environment, our own world, where we can interact with our friends, colleagues, and groups of our choosing to really get the information that we care about, that we prefer. Whether this is good or bad overall, I don't know, but it's certainly a change, and in turn kind of makes our expectations that the system's just going to show us what we need. A really excellent canonical example of a company that changed the interface and became a verb in the process is Google. So Google, with their real innovation, was their entire interface, at least at the beginning, was one box on a white screen that said Google at the top, and you type in whatever you were seeking in that box, and you get all the information basically on the internet returned right to your browser almost instantaneously. This is a real revolution in the way that people interact with systems, and really changed people's expectations on how complex they expect things to be. So if it's not as simple as Googling something, it might be perceived of as very complex. Similarly, for something like Twitter, where Twitter and the ability to have a different kind of level of discourse and interaction that's particularly short and bursty, that really appeals to a lot of people's the way they absorb information in short, concise bursts. Whether it's a cause or a consequence, I don't know. But Twitter, of course, has definitely impacted the way that people interact with each other and with society at large by having this very concise, very bullet-like ability to tweet out your information. Also, incidentally, behind the scenes on Twitter is something that I think is also a fairly impactful thing, which is the advent of what they call tweet bots, which are automated systems that respond to your tweets and inquiries and things like that to provide pretty good targeted customer support and things like that in a way that's very, very interactive, very quick, very easy, and makes people, again, ratchet up their expectations. And then, of course, the poster child for a company that's essentially based on this concept of mass affluence and high expectations that drive our expectations higher is Apple, who really invented the whole concept of a personal smart device that we have in our pockets. When I used to give this similar type of lecture, 5 to 7 years ago, I would actually ask people in the audience, when I do it in person, how many here have a smartphone? And it was quite interesting because, at that time, you may have gotten 50%, 25, 30, whatever, 70, but now you don't even ask that question because everybody has a smartphone, and everybody has this very powerful, very personal computer right in their pocket that impacts the way they interact both with their business and on their personal lives. So all of these different things, the Starbucks effect of having a customized experience, the Amazon catering to our needs, the Facebook ability to limit our information, the Google idea that we have easy search that we can find anything, Twitter delivering information in small bites, and Apple, of course, catering to making things beautiful and easy to use, has really ratcheted up the expectations in IT, and has, as many people have said, driven the consumerization, as they call it, of information technology. So that's all interesting, but let's take a step back. So there's, obviously people have a higher expectation now, but let's define what do we mean by user experience when we're talking about a user experience of a system. There's actually an ISO definition for this that's useful, right? It kind of says what, as ISO definitions are, they're kind of technically useful, and it says that it's the perceptions and responses from a use or anticipated use of a product, system, or service. Okay, great. What does that mean? I think that a good way to think about user experience is taking this kind of ISO definition into account, but also looking at it from a variety of perspectives in sort of a different way. So I think that one of the primary aspects, or a good way to look at it, is through this sort of is through all these different aspects. So first of all, a system, to have a good user experience, must be useful, right? It has to deliver something of use to me in some way, shape, or form. Like just like a hammer drives a nail, a system needs to accomplish some goal for me. If it's not useful, I'm not necessarily going to have a good user experience delivering it. That use might be entertainment. In the case of an enterprise asset management system, it's probably helped me get my work done, right? That needs to be there. It needs to actually be useful to me. It also needs to be desirable. Now this one kind of often elicits a bit of a chuckle from people who are familiar with SAP. Who would really want to interact with SAP, I guess, net of people who work there. But it's really part of their new user experience strategy is to make, it's actually explicitly stated now, that they want to make SAP a desirable system to use. And by this, they want it to resonate with people, to really have, kind of feel like their own system, rather than an SAP system, a third-party system. And that really does have a psychological impact on the way people perceive things. If it's our system rather than their system, it really makes it more desirable to interact with. Accessible. So accessibility isn't just making sure that you have proper things like screen readers and such for people who are blind, but also indicates the ability to tailor the interface for different needs that people have. So for example, many people in the enterprise asset management field face an aging workforce. And I know as I've gotten older, I like to make the fonts on my screens a little bit bigger. So what a great experience it is when I come across an application that lets me make the fonts just a bit bigger so I can read it just a bit easier. Also, another case in point, if you have things that have a set color scheme and you're trying to make indications based on the colors red and green, a significant proportion of the adult male population is actually red-green colorblind and can't really tell the difference between red and green readily. So having the ability to customize that color scheme to maybe use some different colors to indicate different states might help them get a better user experience. So accessibility isn't just about adhering to some laws that are in place in different countries, but it's also a good way to make a system more pleasurable for people to use who have differing abilities. Credible. This is something that I believe SAP does a fairly good job with, where you really want to have a good user experience with a system. You need to believe what it's telling you, right? You need to take that as the truth and be able to take action on that and believe that action is going to make a difference. If the system isn't credible, if you don't believe the information in it, you're not going to have a very good user experience with it. And I think this is something that, again, is a little bit of a difference between applications that are designed just sort of for the world and applications that are designed to be used in the enterprise. Is that credibility is really important in the enterprise because you're making kind of real-time business decisions based on what you see in that system. Findable. So this goes back to the Google story I was talking about before, where systems that are difficult to navigate and find the information and the transactions that you need to use are generally not perceived of as very usable. So if I have to memorize a bunch of arcane codes and things like that and know exactly which box to search in to find this thing and then a different box to search in to find that thing, that's not a terribly good user experience. So what needs to happen is a system needs to be very readily, have all its information very readily findable, or as findable as possible. right? So people recognize that, that enterprise systems are complex, so they're willing to work a little bit at it, but you need to make things as simple as possible so that information that is needed can be located and used. And then we get to usability. So usability in this sense, I'm referring to as easy to use and also learnable. So obviously enterprise systems and any kind of enterprise transactions where you're actually doing things in a complicated environment might have a level of complexity. But the idea here is that once you've seen it once, you can do it again, or you can leverage your existing experience with that system to figure out how to do things. You don't have to have training and a big cheat sheet to figure out exactly how to get things done. And I think that that's a big step in making systems usable, especially enterprise systems, where today there's a lot of folklore and kind of, oh, well, this is how you do this specific trick in this transaction or this, that, or the other. And instead, it should be a system that's fairly readily learnable and usable for people. And note, of course, that a lot of people conflate usability with user experience, but I argue with this entire diagram that usability is only a part of your user experience, right? So if I have a very learnable and easy to use system, but I don't believe it, or I can't read it because the fonts are too small, then it's not a very good experience for me, regardless of how easily I can learn to use it. So it's just one aspect of usability or user experience. And lastly, and most importantly, a system with a strong user experience needs to be valuable. And this means not just for the people using it, has to provide them with some kind of value, some kind of tangible value, but also for the stakeholders, the business managers, the people who are responsible for managing the system. They need to get value out of it too. It needs to really maximize the enterprise value by making these things easier to use, making it more readily accepted, and really driving adoption and better data quality and all those kinds of things. So this diagram, I think, helps to illustrate a number of the different aspects that are important for enterprise usability and user experience. But really what it boils down to is making people happy with using the system, right? So that might seem simplistic and overly simplistic, I guess. But really, that's what the ISO definition is talking about. It's about that anticipated kind of feeling of how do I feel when I use this system, and if you're happy, then it's a good user experience. So what does SAP have, and what are they thinking about doing to improve their user experience? What have they done? Well, first of all, let's take a look at some of the key trends and concepts behind SAP's thinking on this topic. So first of all, SAP is positing a couple of different things here. That software is now ubiquitous, right? There's a famous quote by Mark Andreessen, the founder of Netscape and a famous venture capitalist these days, who said, software will eat the world, right? And I think he's just about right, because nowadays we interact with software in almost every aspect of our life. You're interacting with software right now to view this presentation. When I wake up in the morning and I read the news on my tablet, I'm interacting with software. When I do almost anything, when I drive my car, right, my car is actually controlled inside by software. So software really has a ubiquitous position in our lives, in our modern lives. And this has some implications. So all these smartphones, tablets really blur all this interaction that we have in our private lives. Really blurs between our business lives as well. So my phone is something that I use not just for contacting my friends and family, staying in touch with them, but it's also something I use for contacting my business colleagues and customers, right? So it's definitely, it crosses the line between things that I use for my own purposes and things that I use in my professional purposes. And these drive some different expectations. So these devices are somewhat status symbols, right? They're sort of this birds of a feather feeling of, oh, you have the same phone I do, or oh, you're an Apple user or an Android user or whatever. So there's a certain level of, I guess, interaction that people have on that basis, which drives this idea that people want great experience and that these experiences should be almost fun, right? And lastly, and I think most importantly, is that technology is not limited to just the experts, right? So nowadays, everybody uses technology. It's not just people in white smocks behind in a glass room that are responsible for technology in a corporation. It's everybody. Everybody uses it. Everybody gains from it, and everybody will benefit from a better experience. So SAP's kind of taking a look at some of these trends and distilled a vision that is simply provide leading user experience for business applications, right? I love that. Short, simple, to the point. That's what they want to do, provide leading user experience for business applications. And so a mission behind that is to deliver attractive applications that make people successful at work. And I think that they have a good baseline for achieving this. And they've done this through a kind of a three-part strategy: new, renew, and enable. So they've recognized through that they already have a legacy, right? So there's 20-some thousand SAP transaction screens out there. Thousands and thousands of customers have these embedded into their daily business lives. It's a fairly large organization, large impact there. So this three-tier strategy is important to allow people to adapt to this pace of change in a way that makes sense to them. So on the enable side, they've delivered some tools that allow customers to create scenarios that help them maximize their own value, help them maximize their user experience. So we'll talk about a lot of these tools later on, but these are things like personas, in some cases, NetWeaver Business Client, things like that really let you take your existing system and make it better. Next, of course, they have this renew concept where SAP themselves are redeveloping many of their broadly used business scenarios in the form of SAP Fiori applications that really take away a lot of the complexity. Instead of being transaction-focused, monolithic transaction-focused applications, they're now breaking these down into the different roles and making it a much more flexible and approachable system. So we'll talk much more about SAP Fiori and how that impacts the SAP user experience strategy, because it's really at the core. And lastly, anything new that they introduce now has a consumer-grade application. So we talked at length about how the consumerization of ITs really had a large impact. And SAP, of course, has absorbed this, as have most of its competitors. And now anything that SAP introduces has that certain level of beauty and usability and accessibility that formerly, maybe they didn't have so much. So I'm thinking of tools like Lumira. If you've seen that, that's their new business objects reporting tool that's really quite beautiful, easy to use, lets you render these great graphics that are interactive and share them with people. It's quite a nice new technology that's been introduced in the past few years. And that's replicated through many of the other newer things that SAP has done across. So the three-tier strategy is new, renew, enable. And at the core of it is the SAP Fiori user experience. So Fiori is, in my opinion, almost more of a philosophy than a technology, because what they've done is they've taken this kind of philosophy that surrounds these user-centric design principles to make a role-based application that's very coherent and consistent across all kinds of different business tasks. So the idea here is that Fiori is personalizable, and it can run on any device, and it can really make the experience much more delightful. So as SAP kind of rolls out Fiori, it's really changing the way that people interact with SAP and making it less of the SAP system and more of our system, because you can tailor it and you don't even really necessarily have to know if you're interacting with SAP. And the reason I say that, at least I feel like it's almost more of a philosophy than a technology, is that there are some, although most of it is implemented, of course, within the SAP UI5, using the SAP UI5 technologies based on some things we'll get into in a little bit. But so you can implement this same philosophy with other technologies as well, and I think SAP is making great progress towards making everything they have sort of adhere to this Fiori user experience. So let's switch gears a little bit, and instead of talking about philosophy and all this kind of stuff, let's dig into some of the user interface technologies that are out there. So I've drawn this diagram that I kind of like, that I think helps explain how all these different things fit together, right? So at the base here, at the bottom, we have our SAP system in gray, right? So this has embedded within it the SAP Gateway, which is essentially a translation engine between the ERP system and the internet technologies, RESTful internet technologies, you may have heard that term, of JSON and OData and things like that that are really internet standards that let SAP talk to other applications besides just in its own ABAP world. So this baseline talks through the technologies, tools, and clients that SAP has introduced in the past few years to really make to really help bring their entire new strategy to life. So let's take a look at some of these technologies first. So of course, Dynpro is still out there. That's what we would consider to be the existing ABAP applications we all know and love, you know, IW32 and IW38 and MyGo and all that stuff. That's all implemented in Dynpro, ABAP Dynpro, and of course that's been around for a long time and will continue to be maintained for a bit. But it's gradually been augmented with Web Dynpro technology. So Web Dynpro is also ABAP based, but is a much more flexible, sort of web-focused way of interacting with that same ABAP level system. That again is more of a modern approach. Next, of course, is SAP UI5, which has actually been open sourced now. And what that is that's it's a modern HTML5 JavaScript cascading style sheets library. So all those buzzwords that might not mean anything to you, but those are the basic lifeblood of any kind of web application that's built today. SAP has embedded them in this very nice business-focused library that allows them to build other things on top of them. So the tools that are used to interact with these technologies are principally, so at least in terms of how you might take them forward into the user experience strategy, are things like SAP Screen Personas. SAP Screen Personas allows you to create flavors on top of your Dynpro and Web Dynpro screens to modernize them and make them more streamlined and more suited to your specific tasks. We'll talk about that in a little bit of more detail in a minute. The SAP Web UI is a web-based integrated development environment that lets you create UI5 applications both in the cloud and on-premise. And then the theme designer. The theme designer is something that helps improve the desirability of the applications by letting you create themes that match your own corporate colors, look and feel, fonts, things like that, to really deliver a much more coherent experience across all of these different platforms. So, of course, there's SAP GUI. The Business Client, which is a tool that lets you put all these things together in a role-based interface. On top of that is the SAP Enterprise Portal, which has fallen from favor a little bit, but it's definitely still out there as a viable technology as an entry point to these different clients. And then the SAP Fiori Launchpad. So this is the new king on the hill, if you will, the new center point that SAP is envisioning as the point of access for all of the SAP ERP technologies. So within that, we'll see that they connect together in this type of way. So Dynpro is directly connected through to SAP GUI. Screen Personas can modify that. Web Dynpro, similarly, directly connected to the ERP system through ABAP. We can create these web applications that can be modified by Screen Personas as desired, that are then displayed in the Business Client, Portal, Launchpad. And then, of course, SAP Gateway, again, the translation between the ABAP language, the ABAP world, and kind of the internet world, communicates directly with SAP UI5 and can also create these new beautiful applications. And also, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about mobility a little bit. The mobile platform can also incorporate some of these different technologies, principally the UI5 type of thing. They also have some different capabilities as well. We're not going to dig into that too much today, but just know that it's there and that some of these technologies, especially UI5, can be mobilized quite easily. Dynpro and Web Dynpro, not so much. Those are designed to be mostly on-premise connected applications. So the SAP Toolkit, UI Toolkit for HTML5, which is SAP UI5. Again, we talked about this a little bit. This is the core technology that's used to build Fiori applications. It's essentially a set of business-oriented HTML5 controls that can be extended and really lets you build these great modern applications, leveraging Gateway through OData integration. Really nice technology, and it's actually at the core of our Hydrogen product that we'll show you in a few minutes. I'm very bullish on this, and I think that if you're entertaining any kind of enhancements to your EAM system, UI5 definitely has to be worth a look as a consideration. Web IDE is one of the tools you can use to build these UI5 applications. You don't have to. You can use anything you want, really. It's just HTML and JavaScript. But this has a nice code editor that supports a lot of the different development environments, including the HANA Cloud Platform and on-premise environments. So and it incorporates a lot of these different high productivity kind of tools, some of the modern tools that people really want to use in their environments, things like Git and mock data and all those types of modernisms, if you will, for development. So SAP Web IDE is an excellent tool to consider if you're going to build UI5 applications. The Floorplan Manager and Web Dynpro ABAP. So this is, again, part of that Web Dynpro family. So Web Dynpro has come a long way from its inception. When it was first created, it was sort of an object encapsulation of ABAP that lets you create web applications, and that was nice and good. But they've really taken it quite a few steps further than that now. And now you can almost assemble through these building blocks and configuration and floor plans. You can configure these almost tool-free, development-free kind of applications that can be configured to do a lot of the tasks that would have required a lot of work before, like displaying lists and selecting items and showing a query and that kind of stuff. So there's a bit of ABAP programming, of course, involved, but this is definitely a very high productivity environment now and allows a lot of excellent user experience possible. I've actually seen some of the newer content that we'll talk about, the SAP business content that now is rendered in Web Dynpro that looks almost indistinguishable from an SAP UI5 Fiori application. So they're really kind of converging on that whole idea of a philosophy of Fiori having this very coherent and simple interface. Very good stuff, and there's very good content for EAM. The GUI family, so of course, this is what people think of when they think of interacting with SAP, the SAP GUI. It, of course, is being carried forward for the next few years at least. The dates I've heard bandied about are 2025 is kind of the dates that it's going to start to languish a bit. But as of right now, it's certainly a first-class citizen in the SAP landscape. They improve it bit by bit. But as this disclaimer at the bottom says, SAP themselves are not using it to build any kind of new applications. Anything new that they're implementing, they're going to be using Web Dynpro or UI5. However, they're going to continue to support and extend the existing Dynpro-based applications, for the foreseeable future. So, again, no panic there, no reason to rip everything out and replace it, but just know that this is not the future necessarily. And we're moving on from the SAP GUI. Theme Designer I talked about just briefly, but this is an underused but I think very interesting tool that lets you create themes that can apply across all your different interfaces in SAP. So if you have a certain color scheme that really represents your company, Like Vesta, we have these colors over here on the side, the maroon, green, yellow, and blue. I could create a theme in SAP, the theme designer, that would then apply across all our UI5 applications, our web Dynpros, even our SAP GUI for HTML, our portal, and our business client applications, and really make them kind of have that coherent color scheme across it, helping people kind of think of it as our system, not the SAP system. And it has some different capabilities here, so you can either do kind of a quick configuration and just do some quick nip and tuck on different things, or you can get into the expert mode that we're sort of showing here, where you can get down into the weeds and configure, pretty much down to the nth what you want to do. And lastly, of course, if you know cascading style sheets, CSS, you can go in and create a very customized look and feel for your SAP applications and take those through the entire landscape. So a very good tool to consider for improving the cohesiveness of your EAM applications. Screen personas, we talked about a little bit before. So probably the easiest way to talk about it is just to show what we have. So this is a little maintenance dashboard. When you log into SAP, this is based on the HTML GUI. When you log into SAP, the first transaction you see by default is the SMEN transaction, which is the menu. What we've done here is created as a replacement for that just for this role, these maintenance people who then see how many work orders. So there's a query that gets run when they by script when they log in. It calculates the number of orders they have, number of notifications they have, and then they can get right to those orders and notifications by clicking those buttons. Then they could create a notification, check a purchase order to see if their parts are in, or create a requisition for different parts they need. And you could, of course, imagine that you can elaborate this to be whatever's needed in your landscape. But this replaces, the basic SAP GUI login and makes it a bit more focused on specific tasks. So what Personas is capable of is hiding elements, so you can hide things, make the screens more transparent and simple without having to change configuration or program. You can automate tasks, so for example, retrieve the number of work orders that are assigned to my work center or whatever, and bring those back to a screen. I can, of course, by doing that, decrease my training time, make users feel like, hey, this is our system, this isn't some crazy system I have to learn, this is something that we help develop, and then also allow you to really reduce the costs of doing this. So all this stuff is basically kind of amounts to, my viewpoint on it is, if you can build a nice PowerPoint and you have people who know some nice JavaScript experience, you can build screen persona screens. And it can really be a great boon for extending the life of your existing EAM applications. So talking a little bit about the integration between these things, we have the Fiori Launchpad, which I talked about before. So this is envisioned to be the new place that when we move to SAP S/4HANA, this is the thing that people will see first, is they'll log in and see this this screen with tiles on it that just has the direct links to the tasks they need to do. So I need to create sales orders or track them or approve a requisition or what have you. You can do all kinds of different personalization here to show different things at the top, or hide them entirely if you say, I don't really need to do that. I can hide different tiles that are assigned to me. Plus, it has the ability to go ahead and, when you implement S4 or any of the HANA-based systems, you can go ahead and search just on some text, and it'll find, kind of in an almost Google-like way, if I search for, pump 101 or something like that, it'll find all the work orders, it'll find the functional locations, the technical objects related to that, and it'll find the work orders and things all related to that pump 101 that I typed in, even the requisitions. So it gives you that much more easily findable experience for working with SAP. Very nice innovation indeed. Business Client. So Business Client essentially is a single point of entry into your SAP system, sort of like the Launchpad, but it's designed. It was designed earlier and more on the older ERP kind of stack, but they can play together nicely. And what it allows you to do is import or create role-based content for people. There's an excellent set of EAM roles out there, especially if you're on Enhancement Pack 7 or higher, that can let you create a nice maintenance technician role or something like that that gives people a kind of a one-stop web interface for all the kind of work that they'll need to do. It's certainly worth looking into for your EAM needs, and a great way to start to improve your user experience in the SAP EAM world. Mobile platform, just talk about very briefly. This is mostly about a play for delivering on app value, not infrastructure. So if you implement the mobile platform, I'm sure you've heard of tools like SAP Work Manager and things like that. Of course, this takes away a lot of the need to build all that underlying infrastructure to create mobility in your organization. You don't need to worry about all these different supportability, security, app management, integration tasks. It's all kind of taken care of in the platform in a sort of a one-stop shop. And a lot of that is reliant on the SAP Gateway, where you can then expose your SAP backend systems through, as I described before, OData services. So it's sort of a development environment, if you will, but it really lets you create these nice services and extend them in ways that you wouldn't be possible before. So it lets you extend your SAP environment really towards the web, towards things like UI5, towards any other tools that you might have out there in a way that's directly supported and in the spirit of working in your SAP stack. So Hydrogen. So Hydrogen is something that we've developed that, as I said, uses the SAP Fiori user experience paradigm and should fit in seamlessly with all the other Fiori applications that you may have seen, and also is designed to have a very simple infrastructure. So it's not only simple for the end users, but it's simple for the people responsible for installing and maintaining it. So we don't require a lot of middleware or specific mobile platforms. It's just a direct connection to your ERP system. It's a very simple and clean interface that we'll see probably best in the demo, but it looks great on laptops, tablets, and mobile devices. We have the ability to push, work order notifications, operations, objects costs, all that kind of information straight out to your device and have it work offline. You can very easily create different roles. So if you have a role that is more of an operator type of role, all you need them to do is maybe create notifications. You can very simply create a role, push that out to your operators, and they can then create notifications for exceptions they find on the floor. Or you can create a role that's an entire kind of maintenance technician role where they can process work orders and create notifications and do all the confirm them, all that type of stuff that needs to be done. The roles can be very customized to hide or display different tasks or fields as you need them without doing any coding, which is very nice. And we've also embraced that findability aspect that can be inherent in SAP HANA. We don't require HANA, but you can have some of that kind of very easily searchability for your technical objects in your in the Fiori Hydrogen application. It supports different themes. Of course, we have an outdoor theme of high contrast that doesn't look great in presentation, but certainly works well if you're in a high glare environment. And lastly, of course, we've paid attention to the need and requirement to work offline in many EAM environments. So we have synchronization that relies on deltas, just the changes to reduce sync times. You don't have to wait forever when you need to sync up. So the architecture, just very briefly, is UI5 in the middle. We're using containers, either Apache, Cordova, or Electron, to abstract from the system so we can support iOS, Android, and Windows all kind of with the same UI5 code. That communicates through HTTPS to what we call the Vesta JSON adapter here, and that's it's similar in effect to what Gateway does, but it's special purpose just for what we're doing in Hydrogen, so it's more limited. Of course, we will be supporting SAP Gateway if you've already committed to that technology. We're going to have Gateway content that can do the exact same thing for in 2017. So that is the basic architecture. And now let me turn it over to Peter for a brief demo. He's going to show all these different cool features. And let me switch over my presenter. There we go. Peter, do you have it? Oh, hold on.
Opening your screen.
Okay.
Okay. All right. And you should be seeing my screen here any second.
I can see it.
All right. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Rob. So I'll be showing Hydrogen on the desktop today. As Rob mentioned, it works on tablets and mobile phones as well. But for demonstration purposes, it's just easier on the desktop. With us using the UI5 technology, it will adapt automatically to the size of the screen. So you can actually connect to multiple systems and you can configure multiple systems. You can change the language that you want to use while you are logged in. We'll stick to English for now, and I will log in with my test user. Now that's the same username and password that you would use to log into the SAP GUI. So if you've seen Fiori before or used it before, even just from the screenshots from Rob earlier, this will be familiar. This is the Launchpad, and each of these squares is what's called a tile, and is basically navigation to a different section, so to another application, if you will. Some of them already present a little bit of information. So on the work order tile, we can see that I previously downloaded 3 work orders when that happened. So it presents some information to us already. Briefly, I'll click on my username up here. Here you can switch the theme, so that's the high contrast theme that was earlier mentioned. And then Rob mentioned roles, or that Hydrogen is very role oriented. I'm not going to show the configuration aspect today, but just briefly, if I were to change to, let's say, the test admin role, you'll see that I only have one tile available to me now. So we can really drive what the end user sees from a tiles perspective, and then even down to the field level, the order that the fields appear in on the screens, whether a user is allowed to release a work order or change user statuses on the work order. We can, down to that kind of level, we can drive what a user can do based on the role. So to start off, I'll show how you bring in data. So Hydrogen is geared really to be an offline application first. So in order to do that, you have to specify all the information you want to take with you. So all the work orders, the notifications, and master data, where master data is all your function locations and equipment that are pertinent to you, as well as we pull down catalog codes, work center lists, etc., that we then allow the user to have in drop-down boxes to make entry of data easier. So let's look at the work order download area specifically. So we have a concept of variants, very similar to what you have in SAP. So I can have multiple variants created. And we limit the number of parameters that the user is allowed to see here based on what's important to them. So if you organize your information by perhaps work center, you can make only that field visible to them, and they specify their work center that they want to pull data for. So depending on what is important to you or how you organize your data, we can customize a template, if you will, that you can then create a variant for. So for this particular variant, I only want the in process and outstanding documents, and I have it such that I pull work orders from 7 days ago and currently 3 days, but let's change that to 7 days going forward. And so I can download that now. So if I come back tomorrow, then the 7 days ago and 7 days forward is obviously adjusted from tomorrow. So now I have actually 7 work orders that got pulled down from the 3 previously. And if I were to just hit download again now, you'll see it's trying to do deltas. So because I haven't changed anything to my variant, it will just try to download if any new work orders have been created or updated, those will be pulled in, but obviously nothing has been changed since 20 seconds ago. So very similar to notifications here, for example. Here I've specified a date range for the notifications I want to pull down. And so that's just another example of how we do that. Okay, so back to the Launchpad screen. Let's say I'm now out in the field. I have all the information, all my data pulled down that I need to get my work done. And I see that there's, maybe a pump or piece of equipment that needs some attention. So I go to our search screen where I can either search by text, so pump, we have a lot of pumps, or I can just navigate. So what's displayed here from the beginning is the highest level function locations that match my download. And any function location here that has this little arrow on the right means there's either sub-equipment or sub-function locations underneath this particular one. So if I click on it, I now get the next level down. And if I can continue like this, I can jump back to any previous level as well from here. And we even show sub-equipment, which I will get to in a second. So the equipment here is denoted by the little wrench, and then function locations by this other icon. I can select one and view some details about it. Now the list of these fields here is configured for my role. So we have a lot more fields that we could show here, but we just configured these. Similarly, if I go to an equipment, I can view the details or the configured details for that piece of equipment. And what I want to do is create a notification here. So this is a simplistic create screen. Again, just for demo purposes, we have many more fields that we could add, but we've defaulted some values already. So for my role, notification type is typically a maintenance request, but I can certainly change that to one of the others in the dropdown. I can give it a description, so perhaps a bearing overload. I'm okay with the priority. It's already populated the function location and equipment from the previous screen. And then I can enter a damage code as well. So let's say it was mechanical and let's say corroded for now. And so I can say save, and this has now been committed locally. And so if I go back to the Launchpad, we can see on this outbox tile that we have one new entry there. And we'll have a look at that once we've created a few more things. So let's look at the notification list that I have. So on the left is the list of the ones that have been downloaded. And actually on the bottom here, there's bearing overload. So that's the one that I just created. I could actually make some more changes to it if I thought that was important. I can search through this list based on any of the fields that are listed. So I could do it by even the part of the notification number or just the text. So you can quickly find what you are looking for. If I select one here, we have some details on the notification header. I even have some long text available to me. If there are any causes, I can see those, any items and tasks, and attachments. So there's an image that's attached to this particular notification. I can view that. I can also attach more images. I'll do the same thing, or I'll do that on when we get to the work order screen in just a second. What I want to do is I want to create a work order based on this voltage fluctuation notification. So all I do is say create work order. It's already populated all the information that I think is important, so I can just submit this. Again, this is now locally saved. All right, so let's go look at the work orders. Now you'll see also now the outbox has two new entries. So we'll go to work order. Again, all the way on the bottom is the new. That's the work order that I just created that hasn't been submitted yet. And let's have a look at this particular work order here, 462. Again, very similar. We have fields that we have configured that may be important to you. If there were long text, I could see that there. And there's a little bit more information in the list here on the work order list. So we have a little flag, and that means there are measurement points that I can take on this particular work order. And we have a star. That means there's actually a change on this work order that I have that has taken place but hasn't been submitted to SAP. And then the started I will talk about in just a second. But let's look at attachments again. So again, here I could, this is a PDF file that I can view. This could be perhaps a user manual, instruction manual, whatever may be important to the user. And then I can also attach another image to this. So I'll just select this one here. And if you're on a mobile device now, for example, your iPhone, you get the option to either take a new picture or just attach one that you'd already taken previously. All right, I can also edit status. So, for example, let's say we'll put this thing on hold for a contractor. Right, so that'll be a user status that is set once we submit it. And let's take some measurement points. So here, for example, let's put in a reading of 66. And there's some quantitative values here as well. So I can just choose one of these, and perhaps we'll also enter a value here for this temperature reading. And we'll submit those. All right, so let's look at the operation. On the operation, you can see now here there's the started that I mentioned earlier. And what I did was, early in the day, I came into this operation, I hit a start button, which is now hidden. And the idea is basically you get to your job site, you go to the operation that you want to start working on, hit the start button, put your phone or your iPad or whatever device you may have back in your pocket, do the work you need to do, and then when you're done with your work, you come back, you hit the start button. We calculate the amount of time that it took you. I'm just going to round up here, and you can say, you know, cleaned up, or better description hopefully than that, and then submit. So that again creates a confirmation locally. All right, so let's say now you head back to where you have connectivity. You want to submit all these things to SAP. You go to your outbox, and here you have the list at the top of everything that you want to create or update. On the work order here, for example, there's one new that says ready. That one hasn't been submitted yet. Then we have one new confirmation that hasn't been submitted, a notification, the 2 readings, the status, user status changed, and the attachment. So if I'm ready, I can say sync, and somebody else is processing that right now. But it also tries at the same time to download the notifications if anything was changed or if another work order was created. So let's go have a look at, for example, the attachment that we added earlier, which was on 62 here. So I actually added the same number. And you can see also that the status has been updated. Lastly, I just want to point out here this tile at the bottom left. It says external sample. When I click this, this is actually loading an application that's hosted on one of SAP's open example servers. And so this is their work list sample application. So the idea is if you already have some Fiori applications in-house, we can reference them in here and they'll look like they are native to the application. So that is essentially most of the functionality. Oh, one last thing. The green online button here in the bottom, that just points the user to the fact that they can connect to the SAP system currently. If I were to disconnect from the internet, that would go red and say offline, but I would still be able to do all my work. So I think we are coming up on the allotted time. So I don't really think we have any more time for questions, but I would like to thank everybody for attending today.
Yes, thanks, Peter. If there's a quick question, if you want to type one in, that would be fine. Otherwise, we will go offline in a minute, and thank you very much for your participation. Okay. So here's a quick question that was I think you mentioned this, but how do the users get the work assignments in Hydrogen? So how is that done? Or how can that be done?
Okay. Yeah, so to get the work that is assigned, you have to specify the selection criteria in a variant and then download that data.
Okay, so you could specify something like Work Center or personnel
Yeah,
number?
so you could, exactly. So if your data is organized by Work Center or perhaps a revision, we could make those fields available to you here, and you specify those and then click on the download button.
Okay, let's see. Are there any other questions? I'm looking for them. Let's see. Apparently there's another one, but I don't see it.
I see one here. Is there support for SSO? Not at the moment. That's something we have in the backlog for next year sometime.
Good. All right, if there are no further questions, then we will call it a wrap. And again, thank you for your presentation, Peter, and thank you everyone for your time and attendance. Goodbye.